Good evening, my friends. I grew up on very old movies, thanks to my grandparents and my sister. Well, I guess my whole family. And today I want to talk to you about some of my favorite classic horror and scary books. One of them is something I turn to every October, and it is a delight. And before I begin, I want to share with you something personal. Um, we grew up on horror, on something scary, and I think there's something for everybody when it comes to um, the fun of it. I think there's a reason why a lot of people like roller coasters, right? The thrill, the adrenaline, and then knowing that you can get off at the end. And when we were young, my mom's dad used to love to entertain us by doing something a little bit scary. And one of his favorites was this poem called Little Orphaned Annie. And the poem itself is by James Whitcomb Riley. And my sister used to beg my grandpa to tell this poem over and over again, to the point where my grandpa practically had it memorized. And so at the very end, okay, and I'll raise my finger and I'll go our hands and I'll go like this. He would reach for our legs and grab them as we would try to escape. And it was like that scary excitement built up. And I'm just going to read you one of the stanzas from it, okay? Oh, so, and one time a little girl 'ud alas laugh and grin and make fun of everyone and all her blood and kin. And once when they was company and old folks was there, she mocked 'em and shocked 'em and said she didn't care. And this till she kicked her heels and turned to run and hide. There was two great big black things a standing by her side. And they snatched her through the ceiling, for she knowed what she's about. And the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. And it was the expected, even though we knew what he was going to do. And we'd try to escape if we were both on his lap. And so I guess you can say that scary stories were a part of who we were from the very beginning. So the reason I, of course, want to present and share with you some of my favorites are because it is October. And the one that I always read or listen to by audio is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Bradbury. He is one of my favorite authors, and this is a story that I love very much. And the reason I want to start with it is because in his prologue, he talks about the month of October. And he says it is a rare month. And in this, he says it's a rare month for boys because the two protagonists of the book, Jim and Will, they're best friends, and they're boys. And it is around the time they're 12 years old. And their birthdays are in October, and one was born on Halloween, one the day before. And it's almost like this constant competition of one going to be older or one's going to be always a day younger, that sort of a thing. But he talks about the months, and that's kind of what I wanted to do quickly. He talks about how June is one of the best months because school is out and you can just leave. Yes. And July, you're riding high. It's the summer, right? We can all remember this, right? I know right now COVID has made us feel like every month is the same, right? But think back to how that feels. And August is still pretty good, right? It's still pretty good. You're still out. It's still summer. And then there's September. Oh, September, you got to drag yourself back into school. But October is a fine month because you've kind of gotten used, to being back in school, and you know what is on its way. Halloween. And he talks about being able to play pranks, a certain old man, whatever, maybe who's kind of a nasty person on the block, and you're thinking about the costume you want to wear, right? And I love this description here And if it's around October 20th and everything's smoky smelling and the sky orange and ash gray at twilight, it seems Halloween will never come. Do you remember that anticipation? But in this book, on one strange, wild, dark, long year, Halloween came early. And this is how Halloween came early. A carnival comes to their small, quiet Illinois town. Now, most carnivals will come in the summer, maybe a couple in September, but October, late into October, it's unheard of. But this is a special carnival. It's run by the autumn people. Where do they come from? The dust. And where do they go to? The grave. And what do? Well, they grant people their deepest desires, but not in the way people hope for. Oh, no. Say that there's something you really want. You really want. Maybe you're not able to walk. Maybe you want to run again. Well, they'll grant you that wish. But instead of just running, no, you run mad. You see, they play on people's emotions, for they're not quite human. And these boys, Jim and Will, capture their attention. For being young, perhaps they are not as corrupted by the needs that adults have or the wants and desires that we have, and they can see something is not quite right. And Mr. Nightshade, the owner, is captured by them. Something wicked this way comes. Now, when my sister and I were young, we were first introduced to this next author through film, mostly films that starred Vincent Price. And so I usually love during this month to listen to this audio recording of Edgar Allan Poe. And this does not contain all of his works, although I will point out I do indeed have his complete collection of works, which I do enjoy reading. He wrote both stories as well as poems. And Edgar Allan Poe, in this collection, the reason I like to listen to it, and it reminds me of my first introduction to him, is that it is narrated by both Vincent Price. Remember I told you it was his films that I first became connected to Poe's work, and Basil Rathbone, who also appeared with Vincent Price in some of the movies and also without him. And they do a lovely job. Basil Rathbone is an English actor, and Vincent Price is American. Both have passed on, but they do a lovely job. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Edgar Allan Poe, or maybe only know some of his works, insanity runs throughout. And as somebody with mental health issues, I use that very, I guess, loosely. And it's kind of odd that I still am attracted to his work. But one of the things I appreciate about Edgar Allan Poe is he does recognize that things like depression and people who suffer from mental illness do exist. And that conditions like, doing drugs, including alcohol, can exacerbate certain things. But more than anything, what I like is he tells a really good story. And so for those of you who are wondering, and this one, by the way, just to give credit, if you're interested in this particular audio collection, this is done by Caedmon. And you can look it up. It's by Caedmon Audio, Caedmon. And what he often refers to as, he calls it the imp of the perverse, as one of the stories that's read in here. And he refers to it a lot, like in his story, The Black Cat, which is one of my favorites. And it's about when you know you're going to do something wrong, like you morally know this is not something I should be doing, but you do it anyway, almost because you know it's wrong. Do we all have a little bit of perverseness within us? And I'm not talking about being a pervert, okay? But I'm talking about that knowing that we're doing something that we should not do, but we do it anyway. The chilling idea of things coming back to haunt us, of being buried alive and not being able to get out. I mean, this is the reason my sister and I are both like, we are not going to be, cremate us, please. But there are stories too of hopelessness, frightening scenes of axes buried in people's heads, of people getting their eyes gouged out, or things getting their eyes gouged out with knives. And it's also about just like the lengths that people will go to. And of course, I always love it too when you have a narrator who's like, but I'm not mad. I mean, I totally did this. I put the axe in the head, but not mad. I totally had a reason. Oh, you gotta love a story like that. I'm not mad. There was a perfectly sane reason for me to bury that axe. And for me, listening to people professionally read Edgar Allan Poe's stories is truly a treasure. Lots of fun. I highly recommend it. I know some of the stories are required in classes, but try one, okay? Because I know there's always the same ones that are sort of like, going to read this. But he's really a delight. And the last one I want to share with you is one from my childhood. And there's a couple reasons why I really love it. One is just for the work itself, and the other is for what it represents. So, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz. Let me hold it up so you can see that. Okay, and I prefer the version that is illustrated by Stephen Gammell. Because that's what I became used to. And I also find, not that the other illustrations are not lovely, and lovely in a horrifying way, but these illustrations, these drawings are terrifying. And they terrified me without sometimes even reading the story. But when you combine the two, it's powerful. So, the other reason, besides the book, the other reason I love these is the oral tradition. So understand, if you grew up with these stories or you're familiar with them, that Stephen Gammell, he's got tons and tons of resources in the back of where he gathered the information. These aren't just things he made up. These were oral stories that he went and he tracked and he found in other places. And so what this reminds me of, first of all, is sitting around with my friends and telling stories. Like, do you know what my friend's cousin, what happened to her? We call these today urban legends. And this is, to me, the epitome of Halloween, but not just Halloween. We do these, we tell stories like this all the time. And I think that is what's truly wonderful about this book, is that he put in here these scary stories. I think of it with like holding the flashlight underneath, or just like escaping from like your parents, or when you're an adult, making sure the kids are out of the room and then you tell the most gruesome tale. That's the cool part. And so, like this, okay? They eat your eyes, they eat your nose. And here we go. Look at that. Oh, so you just see the title, so you know what he's eating, right? And the note basically says that there are stories about these sorts of things, of what happens when you are buried, right? So I remember as a kid, the little rhyme, the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. And it's like, okay, reason number 2, my sister and I don't want to be buried. Could be buried alive. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. I don't want to imagine that. And then I got this dude over here eating a cocktail of me. So, all of that going through my young mind when I'm a kid. So, nope, not happening. This one, okay, now this picture comes from the haunted house. I remember this picture. scaring the daylights out of me. It still does. I'm not really looking at it. I'm scaring you. And there is something about the combination of Schwartz and Gammell that is just in your brain. It is in your brain. And one of the things that I really do appreciate is that he has in here the a note that just a note in here about oral stories in general that says other dangers, right? It says that most of these stories have been passed down over the years. Okay, and so he breaks it up into different chapters. And so, he discusses the importance of oral storytelling. And so, if you have never seen this book, and by the way, this at one point was, I have to tell you this as a librarian, was one of the most banned books in the United States, like from school libraries. Parents were so concerned it was going to give nightmares. I don't know. People were going to actually want to go out and eat brains. It was absolutely ridiculous. And it was removed from many libraries. And I recently watched a documentary, which is really fantastic. I saw it on Amazon Prime, not like telling you go out and get Amazon Prime, but his son was saying that he thought that that was one of the things his dad was secretly really proud of, was that his book was like challenged. And there is this need, I think, for a lot of parents to want to, and I can understand that even though I don't have kids, to want to protect their children from certain things. I don't personally agree with banning something for everybody. Just have your child wait until you think it's appropriate. But this is the kind of stir it caused, And to me, when you ban something, that means, oh, really? You don't want me to read that? Everyone starts reading it. So people who ban books don't really understand how that works. So it is a fantastic book. Now, everything I've shared with you is completely appropriate for young adults. This is appropriate elementary school on up. Even though I just told you about the banning, there's nothing in here that's inappropriate. Something Wicked This Way Comes. The language, of course, Ray Bradbury never wrote for a specific audience. I first read this in elementary school. I was fine. I first read in elementary school. This was made into a movie, as was this. Book's better, but the movie is entertaining, but the book's better. And then Edgar Allan Poe, I would rate for Poe because of his language until junior high maybe. I think you'll really appreciate it more in high school, just because of the language. We don't talk like they did in the 1800s anymore. And so unless you're regularly reading King James version of the Bible, you're going to be like, I don't know what this dude's saying. So that's my recommendations. These are some of my favorites. And I encourage you to share stories orally, ones you make up, ones that you hear. I think that's part of the fun of this time of year. Or anytime, really. And I might later this month share one that my friends, Pilar and Marisa, who were a big part of my oral storytelling, Scary Stories Tell in the Dark, Edgar Allan Poe, and even Something Wicked This Way Comes. They were a big part of my childhood and still a part of my life today, passed on to me. And I believe it is one that they may have made up. So I may be sharing that as a story time. So with that being said, good health. Thank you for joining me. And until we talk again, happy reading.